The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion.
Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast, where of course we're giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Today we're marking a landmark episode of episode 50 of the Baggies Podcast, and I thought we'd do that and start that episode with a bit of a season preview. It's time to look ahead to the 46 championship games ahead of us. But I thought for us to gain a bit of a better insight, we'd welcome back somebody who knows the club inside out. We're welcoming back Joe Chapman from Birmingham Live. Joe, how are you? Welcome back to the show, mate.
Yeah, thank you for having me on again.
Honestly, no worries. So, Joe, if people didn't watch the last episode with you on it, would you just mind explaining to us a bit about what you do within reporting on the Albion?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've been at Birmingham Live, Birmingham Mail for over 6 years now. I've been an Albion fan all my life, and something that I've been very, very privileged to do for the last couple of years. There's been real highs and lows in that time, but I'm hoping that we can have a bit of an upward trend this season. Yeah.
So last time you were on here, it was a pretty a dark time for the club, really. I think it was about last January you were on the show, which was obviously just starting into the big Sam rain. And it was very different circumstances with a bit of a charge to survival. But with a bit of a different season ahead in the Championship, are you perhaps more optimistic about the season that lies ahead?
Yeah, I'm intrigued more than anything, really. I must say, at the time of this recording, I haven't actually seen Valérien Ismaël's West Brom yet because of various holidays and stag do's and all this kind of stuff. So I haven't actually seen a friendly match yet. I'm looking forward to the Blues game this weekend. But yeah, it's really, really interesting. It feels like a very, very different kind of approach in terms of the managerial appointment to anything that we've really experienced over the last 10 years or so, really, where they've actually, as a club, have thought outside the box a little bit and have brought somebody through who, I must say, from afar, really impressed me last season in everything he did, not just the results that Barnsley got, but the way he conducted himself as well. So I think all things considered, I'm interested more than anything. But yeah, excitement, of course, because it's a new championship season. Albion, in recent history, certainly our record in that league is very, very good. So you'd hope that we could continue with that vein of form and hopefully have another very successful season.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm yet to have watched any of the friendly games due to similar, holidaying and going about and stuff like that. I haven't managed to catch any of the friendly games.
Waterlogged pitches as well.
Yeah, I think that was probably the most surprise barrier in the way of watching us the other day against Walsall. But obviously you touched a bit on Valérien Ismaël, and I think he intrigues a lot of Albion supporters, especially those who perhaps didn't watch too. Obviously, I don't think many of us will have watched too much of Barnsley last season. But obviously, Big Sam left the club, and I think it was about a month after he left the club, Valérien Ismaël was put in charge. How do you think he'll get on with the players? Because obviously, it's a bit of a different style from what perhaps they might be used to. It's a lot of fitness involved in his style of play. How do you think that he'll adapt, and how do you think the squad will get on in terms of his style of play?
I think ultimately you've got to look at the two groups of players. I think Barnsley, for the purposes of a piece I did recently, I had looked through their squad of last season, and he inherited a squad because, of course, he came in October time, and he inherited a squad with the average age of about 23. So, it was a really, really into what he asked of them. It's a very different kind of squad to the one he's getting at West Brom. I think they've lowered the average age of the squad down just merely through releasing players at the back end of the season, players who did have to be moved on. A number of them over the age of 30, but there are still a number of players in the squad at the moment, players like Phillips, Livermore, Sawyers, Bartley, who are 29, 30, 31 years old now and will have a challenge, I guess, to maintain the levels throughout the course of the season that the Barnsley squad had to do. I suppose that in Alex Mowat, he's got somebody on his side immediately from the off who knows exactly what he demands. I suppose the biggest endorsement really is that Mowat was willing, despite having been worked so hard last season, he was willing to actually follow Ismael to Albion, which, if he wanted an easier route out, he could have just said, well, I'll take up a move to a championship club elsewhere. So that for me is a shot in the arm in terms of what Val intends to do at West Brom. The players, everything. It's easier saying it now in pre-season. The players, every one of them seems to be coming out at the moment. All the noises are that we're enjoying it. We're enjoying the demands, the challenges of pre-season. Players like Townsend and Furlong and Phillips and Livermore, I think, are the kind of players who will enjoy being pushed like that. I think they are a hard-working group. I think we can definitely look to raise the overall quality of the squad that is currently there. But I think, generally speaking, you can't really question their work rate. Even last season, in a very, very difficult season. So I think in that respect, if they can get themselves off on a positive note at the start of the season, it's a huge game, of course, because they're a side that I would fully expect to see at the top end of the table as well under Scott Parker. So if they can kind of send a message that, yes, we've suffered relegation, but we do mean business this season, early doors, the way that Slaven Bilic's Albion did, then that would be the best possible start.
Yeah, and I think that it's a bit of an outside the box choice, as you said. Obviously, we've gone for, I think, over the past 5 or so years, we've gone for pretty your standard managers in terms of obviously survival. I think Bilic was a bit different in terms of that, but obviously we've had our classic journeyman managers, in the way of Allardyce and people like that. But I think it's a 4-year deal that we've signed Ismael on. So do you think that spells like a long-term solution to you? Obviously, if we were to go up this season, which obviously is obviously yet to be discovered whether this sort of thing will happen. But do you think this spells a bit more long-term and a bit more looking further ahead than perhaps usual from the board?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. It's not something that's always been disclosed, the length of a managerial contract. So that in itself was a bit of a surprise. So the fact that they've gone in straight away and backed him, they've paid the money that they needed to do. That wasn't something that we've seen done in terms of a managerial appointment since Roberto Di Matteo, who was a similarly outside the box kind of appointment. That in itself would suggest that they really bought into what Ismael did last season and are willing to and are really, really keen for it to be brought over to the Hawthorns. So yes, that in itself, he's a young manager. He's very, very he's very much got his own idea, his own philosophy that he intends to roll out. So in that respect, they've got to give him time. They've got to give him support in as best they can. It's so distorted at the moment, the Premier League and the Championship. You do feel like we are slipping back into that little period that we had a number of years ago where we did kind of bounce between the two divisions. It feels like that. It feels like every time now we're back in the Premier League, there's going to be an even greater challenge to remain there, and that stability and those 6, 7, 8 years that we had back to back feel a little way off at the moment, because if it's a huge if we do get ourselves back to the Premier League this season or next season, then to remain there, you look at the money that those clubs are spending, like Aston Villa, and it's a big ask. But the first thing he's got to do is try his very, very best to get this team back to where they were only a matter of months ago, and that's back in the Premier League. And I think everything that he said, everything that has come out of the unveiling and his interviews since have all suggested that he's really, really excited by the challenge.
Yeah, I think a lot of Albion fans, it's certainly a more positive atmosphere, and certainly since he last came on the show from what we've had over the past season. Obviously, he's brought in 3 signings already, one of those being Alex Mowat that we've just touched on there. Obviously, Matt Clark coming in on loan from Brighton, which I was personally quite surprised about. I thought he maybe might get a kick in at Brighton this season, but obviously not, and he's been sent on loan to another Championship club after going to Derby last season. And there's a bit of an odd one that people are very excited about, a lot of Albion fans, in Kevin Castro, who's rumoured to be a very bright spark, and obviously those who have seen the friendly games can obviously vouch for him a bit more than probably we can, but has been seen as a bit of a bright spark. How do you think they might improve the squad, or how do you think they might fit in this squad and in the first season under Valérien Ismaël?
Well, Mowat certainly, I think that was one area that I was really, really keen to see strengthened straight away. I mean, there's 1 or 2 areas that still need strengthened, but the midfield for me, I thought what was quite damning really last season, certainly in the last January window, was that Sam Allardyce made moves to bring midfielders in, and it's left us with a midfield of Jake Livermore and Romain Sawyers, who have really not even kicked the ball really for the last 5 or 6 months. So, it's going to take a little while for even them to get back up and running where they were, say, 2 years ago, when they were both so important to Slaven Bilic. So the midfield was one that was really, really important to me from the off. And as I've already said, the fact that Mo was willing to follow Ismael and his staff over here is a really positive sign for me. Matt Clark's a really interesting one, actually. I thought that the year we went up and Derby came to the Hawthorns, it was a really important win for us that day after Project Restart. And he struck me as somebody that was really, really comfortable on the ball and somebody that was very, he's, as most centre-halves are, he's a very tall guy, he's very good in the air. And interestingly for me, somebody that we haven't actually had for a little while now is a left-sided defender. We haven't had somebody that's been really comfortable on the left foot for so long. You go back to Jonas Olsson, and then for that one season, Jolyon Lescott, and to a lesser degree, Johnny Evans, who was pretty versatile and pretty capable of playing with both feet. We've not had that kind of natural player. So I think that's another tick in the box for me that we've kind of, if he's going to play this back three, you need somebody comfortable, because Cole Bartley spoke about it when he was playing with Darren Moore. He didn't enjoy playing on that side to accommodate Hegazi and Dawson. So that's another real positive for me. Kevin Castro, my only experience of Kevin Castro was when he was on trial last season. He played an under-23s game against Wolves, and he looked pretty smart then. So they've obviously decided that he's worth gambling with and giving him a professional contract, which is another exciting element to that midfield potentially. I wouldn't rule him out if he is impressing in training. You wouldn't rule him out for having a first team spot or a first team squad spot this season. So I think all in, we all know where they've got to strengthen. We look pretty good out wide, I think, in terms of his options, and centre half, they're pretty well stocked. But we all know that ideally we need at least one centre forward. We need wing back cover, because I'm still a bit concerned if Furlong or Townsend were to go down in the first game, then we really haven't got any natural cover for them. And we need probably another centre midfielder as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of obviously we'll talk about new signings in just a second, but one position that may feel a little bit like a new signing, it could potentially be the goalkeeping position, because there's a bit of a roulette that who may start. Obviously, David Button has featured quite prominently in the goalkeeping position over the past couple of friendly games. Obviously, he's been rotating with Palmer over the first couple, but he seems to have gained that spot. Who do you think we're going to go with in goal? Obviously, Johnston's still in the mix. He's still an Albion player, but could potentially be on his way.
Yeah, I think if Johnston does go, then, and I must admit at this moment in time, I think that's a big if, because I don't think it's anywhere near as clear cut as it would have been 3 or 4 weeks ago. I still think David Button gets the nod. There's obviously the fact that he's been starting those pre-season games, and I know that they do rotate, but I think more often than not with Ismael in pre-season, he's gone with his strongest team from the off, and then he's sought to bring players like Kipperas and Tullocks and into the game. So I think in that respect, that would be a hint there and then that Button would be the one. He is experienced. He's got more experience. He's got somebody that has played a lot for Fulham and Brentford in the past in this league, so he knows all about it. I must say I'd have been inclined to have given Palmer a go, because I think, well, if ever he's going to have a shot at number one at Albion, it's now. He's 24, 25 years old, so, if not now, then when? I think Josh Griffiths was an absolute no-brainer in terms of giving him a League One loan. So I think Button and Palmer, if you're going into the new season with Button and Palmer, I'm pretty content with that, I've got to say. I think, and if they do manage to shift Johnston and they do manage to get a few quid for him before his contract runs out next summer, then I would be inclined to spend that money elsewhere on the squad. I think goalkeeper wouldn't be somewhere I'd be immediately looking to strengthen again.
Yeah, me neither. I said on Twitter the other day, I said about Palmer, I thought if he's not going to get this chance now, when might he? But obviously he's probably going to have the chance to play as in the number one position at times this season, whether that be in a cup game or maybe the odd league rotation game. So maybe there's a chance that he could come in, step up into the first 11 and prove his chance. It's going to be end up being a bit of a tug of war between the two of them. There's a bit of a dilemma. Obviously, I'm sure the elephant in the room is probably Matheus Pereira in terms of sales. Obviously, there's been a lot of rumours and a lot of interest in him, but maybe nothing particularly concrete just yet with Pereira. How do you think that move might play out? Do you think he's going to get the move, or you reckon we'll end up with him, or maybe going on a loan or something?
The loan's an interesting thought, because it's basically what we did with Carl Grant, almost not in terms of loaning, but in terms of that kind of that instalment, that staggered payment. So in that respect, you maybe receive an instalment this summer, and then again, later down the line, in terms of earning a few quid for now and filling the gaps in the squad that we still need to by spending the money.
Yeah.
If the club feel that they can afford to do that. The other interesting idea on that respect would be that they could loan him somewhere, get a loan fee, and then who knows, in 12 months' time, if they're a Premier League team again, we say, Matheus, do you fancy another crack at the Premier League with us under Ismael? That's all very much conjecture at the moment. There's so many hurdles to overcome in that respect. But Pereira is somebody that I know. I've seen a lot on social media about the idea that he's unhappy, he wants to leave. I don't blame Pereira at all for wanting to test himself at a division which he knows he's capable of comfortably competing in. He could be playing for a top 10 Premier League team, no doubt in my mind at all. I don't think he's unhappy. I think that's probably quite strong. He's not madly kicking up a fuss. I think he knows what West Brom have done for his career in the last couple of years, bringing him to this country and giving him a platform to showcase his ability. So in that respect, if he's still here on the 31st of August, it's more of a problem for Albion financially that they've then got a player who, yes, they could probably still play, and I don't think Pereira is a rotting in the reserves kind of guy. I think he's somebody that we'd need him to go and play 35, 40 games again for us next season if he's still here. But I think for me, the problem then was that, okay, we've got this asset that other clubs in the past, you look at Peterborough, for example, with Ivan Toney, have sold at the right time, have then been able to go and reinvest that money. And it just feels like at this moment in time that this summer feels like the right time to cash in on Pereira, because you just don't know what the next 12 months might hold. You could get a really bad injury or whatever. So the problem for us, of course, is that we haven't got that queue of clubs that are willing to spend 25, 30 million on him. So, I would have really hoped that Pereira, with all the luck in the world, I'd have just said, thank you and shaken his hand. But he's still at the club. That's a bit of an issue for me, really, is that I'd have liked to have thought with a week before the season started, he'd have gone and he'd have got his move, and we'd be able to then go and execute the transfer recruitment drive that Ismael has in mind. So, yeah, it's a bit of a problem. It's going to drag. It's probably quite predictable that it'll probably go into the last week or the last fortnight of the transfer window. And then, as with everything, in that respect, it's a domino thing, and it's a race against time for Albion then to spend the money wisely.
Yeah, and in terms of spending that money wisely, there's obviously, you mentioned a couple of little gaps in the pitch that you think may need a bit of added depth. At striker, there's a bit of a dilemma, because we've been playing Matt Phillips there in the friendlies, and I think that's probably a pretty unprecedented thing for most Albion fans. I don't think anybody would have expected Matt Phillips to be up front. And obviously, we've got Kenneth Thahor, who's still in and around the squad and has been playing in the friendly games. What do you think we're going to do up front? Because I doubt this is going to be our permanent solution, having Matt Phillips up front. I think there may need to be a signing. What do you reckon we're going to do in that area?
Yeah, I don't think in his heart of hearts, I don't think Ismael would have wanted to start the season with Matt Phillips up front, because I think while Phillips has been a really good pro, I thought he ended the last season quite well, actually. He was one of the better players for Albion. After relegation was confirmed, or even slightly before that, I thought he really, he really took to life under Sam Allardyce. So I think he's got other roles on the pitch that we could use him. We could do with him. I suppose he is probably a short-term wing-back option if anything was to happen to any of the two first-choice players.
Yeah,
I think he still can play central midfield. I think he's got an engine on him, and he still retains that little bit of pace as well. So I think he's probably a little bit wasted as a centre forward. I know that his physique and the way he is would lend itself to a target man of sorts, but short. The long and short of it is we've got to go and recruit a centre forward who's ready for the Championship, because I just don't see Kenneth Sahor being that man. I think he's somebody who, through no fault of his own, we've been lumbered with at this moment in time.
Yeah,
he's somebody that is never going to live up to his price tag. And again, that's not his own fault. But with 2 years left on his contract, who's coming in for him? I don't know. Is it a case of, well, we've got to loan him out again? Then that seems a long way if you can't let the guy go at the moment, because we've let Morton go and we've let our other senior forwards go at the end of last season. So we need somebody at this moment in time. I think if you said to me right now, who's your centre forward for Bournemouth away, I'd still say Callum Robinson, to be honest. I think he's still the most natural forward who I would back to in front of goal. I thought we saw 1 or 2 times last season that maybe not enough, but that he, when presented with an opportunity, can find the back of the net. So for me, Robinson at this period in time, but without doubt, we need at least one centre forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a bit of a market for quite a few teams for centre forwards, as there probably always is in a transfer window. But I think over the friendlies we played a 3-4-3, which is obviously typically Ismael's formation. I think everybody banked on that being it for the first game at Bournemouth. How do you think that we'll line up next Friday night against Bournemouth in that formation?
Well, I mean, the Blues game before that is probably going to be a good indicator, I think, because that tends to be that last pre-season friendly tends to be an opportunity for the manager to kind of really. It's a bit of a dress rehearsal, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
I would imagine that Button will start the game. Johnston's obviously going to be, if he's not already, he's going to be coming back from his holiday, so he's got his future to resolve. I suppose he and Ismael have got to decide whether he wants to make himself available for selection in the meantime. But I would think Button would, at this moment in time, I think Button will play. So I would then go Furlong, Townsend as your wing backs with Ajayi, Bartley and Clark. I think the midfield 2 at this moment in time are going to be Mowat and Livermore, because Sawyers has been away on international duty as well. And I think Livermore is somebody who looks in good nick. He seems like he's got a new lease of life again. I don't think he enjoyed the last 6 months under Allardyce. I suppose the same could probably be said for Sawyers as well. But I think Livermore and Mowat are the most natural pairing at this moment in time. So your front 3 then is a little bit more interesting, because you've got Phillips, who's played there, and I would gather that Diangana and Grant will play either side of a striker. For me, that would be Robinson. I suppose we'll see how we go at Blues, but yeah, it's a toss-up at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I personally would go for the same in terms of the whole line. But I think Robinson up front, I think, gives you the best. I think in terms of pressing, I think he'd probably be the best option to go up front. I think obviously we saw at times last season when we were opting for the high press. I think Chelsea would probably be the most immediate one that comes to mind under Big Sam, where we really pressed their back line, and he was quite a big part of it, especially in that second half. And obviously got those 2 goals, obviously in his Chelsea vein of form that he tends to have. But I think Robinson up front would give a nice bit of pressing, and then I think Livermore, I think. Is due a bit more credit than perhaps he gets in terms of being a bit of a workhorse in the midfield, and I think he could be that under Ismael, especially building fitness up over pre-season. He could be that guy. And in terms of centre back, I think Clark is your man as your left-sided centre back. As much as I like O'Shea and I'd like to see a bit more of Kit Prey at some point, I think Clark is your natural left-sided centre back, as you've talked about. So I'd have to agree with that, but. In terms of championship, the championship season as a whole, so you've got 46 games to slog ourselves through this season. Which fixtures would you say that you're most looking forward to? Obviously, you'll be covering them, but which ones are you most looking forward to watching?
Well, it'll be a good preparation this coming Saturday at Blues, because Blues are somebody that a lot of my family are Blues, so we are very much kind of Blues Albion in our house, and. That's always a good one. It is, I suppose, our claim to a derby of sorts, really. I know it's a very, very friendly derby in comparison to the others, but that is the one that we'd have to tick off when it comes around. So yeah, I think Lee Bowyer and Blues are due a pretty decent season. So I think Albion Blues would be a decent test for Albion and Ismael. I'm interested to see how Stoke do this season. I think they've had a few years in the doldrums in the Championship now, and I think Michael O'Neill having a full summer up there. I think, you know, an opportunity there for him to really lay down a mark with Stoke and see how far they can go. I think Stoke historically we don't like, but actually in the last 3 or 4 years we've comfortably had the better of them. So going to the Bet365 and Stoke coming to us, I think will ought to be a good couple of games. And then really, I mean, I know he's just left. I know Scott Parker's just left, but I still really think that Fulham will be up there. I'd back Marco Silva to oversee a decent campaign at Fulham as well. So off the top of my head, they'd be the 3. I think you're looking lower down. I know Barnsley will of course hold a lot of poignancy for a number of the new faces at Albion now. But I think you go down the league. It's such a difficult league. I mean, any given season, Barnsley proved that last season, but you know, Luton have done really well in the last couple of years since they came back up, and there just really are no easy games. It's a really, really overused cliche, but it does ring true in the Championship.
Yeah, and I think I've seen people predicting their tables and the differences in between that below the playoffs and the relegation zone. It's a complete scramble in there for, you know, who you could predict in that. It's just so unpredictable. I know everybody says it about the Championship, but it is probably the most unpredictable league. It's not the one that you want to bet on really in terms of the Championship. So in terms of teams that obviously you've talked about the games that you're looking forward to, but what teams are you going to look out for as in a threat? Obviously there's been talk of a top 4 breaking away as such. Obviously that's not something you could predict, but obviously with Bournemouth, Sheffield United, Fulham and ourselves. But which teams do you think are going to provide a bit of a threat this season when we play them? Obviously everybody's going to provide us a threat, but in terms of for the promotion that we might be aiming for.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think Fulham and Bournemouth. I think Jokanovic is a really good appointment at Sheffield United as well. But there is a cluster of teams. I'm not as sold on Swansea now. There's a lot of disruption going on at Swansea this summer, so I don't know where that leaves them at the moment. I don't know how they can recover from this upheaval so close to the start of the new season. It could set them back. And you've got that cluster of teams underneath who are always there or thereabouts. Teams like Reading and Cardiff and Blackburn and Middlesbrough. And again, on any given day, they'll come and take points off Albion. They've done it before. So I think, I'd say Stoke. I mean, I'm really, really fearful for Derby. I think they were delaying the inevitable last season. But I think I'd be inclined to agree. I don't think you break away at all. I don't think that you can call that really, because if you'd have picked the top 6 last season, nobody would have picked Barnsley, for example. So you'll have those kind of dark horses throughout the course of the season, I'm sure. I think for me, still Bournemouth with Scott Parker. I think it's quite telling that he left Fulham to go to Bournemouth. Yeah, and that's quite a coup for them. So, and we'll see what they're made of in that first game. But I think, for me, Bournemouth and Fulham do really big threats.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other 3, the 2 that came down, and Bournemouth, I think, are probably for me the biggest threats. One that I thought about, a bit of a dark horse, who I was looking at, it could be QPR or potentially Birmingham City, are the ones that I've been thinking about that might strike us as a bit of a dark horse, like you said, the Barnsley that came up into the top 6 next season. But it literally could be absolutely anybody if they get a bit of form going. And in terms of players that could provide us a bit of a threat, who do you have a little bit of a secret admiration for from a different Championship team that isn't West Brom?
Wow, I think that he might not be particularly fashionable, but I think somebody we could probably quite do with at the moment is somebody like Kiefer Moore at Cardiff. I think the way he plays, I think he's more than just a target man. He's more than just like a brute of a centre forward. He's a good footballer. He's a Welsh first choice centre forward. So he's got a hell of a lot. I think he's a really, really good footballer at Cardiff. You go through that Fulham team, it was rather decimated from their loan exodus at the end of last season, but they've still got some very good players. I mean, I'm sure Anguissa is still there, but he was somebody that I thought Much like Pereira, I thought we would have a Premier League move by now. I mean, yeah, you go through all the way through. I mean, looking at Blues, I covered Blues for my Blues colleague the other day. Did a pre-season friendly, and they've got one or two guys. Ryan Woods is a very good sign for them.
Yeah.
Jeremy Bella is a very, very good winger. So you go through the whole division. You'd probably easily pick a starting lineup of players that you'd have in the Albion team. So it kind of, I suppose that really reinforces the idea that you can't write any teams off, because everybody's got a little bit of quality. Even last season, teams like Wycombe, for example, yes, they went down, but what they don't have in quality, they make up for with just collective hard work and being more than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, I think, definitely. There's so many players in there that even if you're a team at the bottom of the league, you've still got your one-star player that would make it in the top of the championship. It's such a mad league like that. I think my player that I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on is probably because he's a target that I would have wanted for the Albion is Jonson Clarke-Harris of Peterborough, who just come up from League One. I know he could be potentially on my short list, but I think I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on, because Ivan Toney came up from Peterborough into the Championship and did incredibly well. So potentially Jonson Clarke-Harris could be following in that mould. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on in particular. So Joe, I'm going to ask you now to make a few little predictions for us. I hope these won't be looked back on in shame by the end of the season. But I've got 3 predictions that I'm going to ask you to make.
I'm sure they will be.
The first one I'm going to say is, who do you think is going to be the Albion player of the season?
Well, because I'm expecting quite big things after a disappointing last season, I think the whole fresh start and the whole kind of everything about the difficulties of last season and finding a lower quality of footballer in terms of opponent, I think Grady Diangana ought to have a big season this season. I think somebody that, for a multitude of reasons, it just didn't really work for him. He had that kind of false dawn at the beginning of the season at Everton, and Bilic leaving and Kravinovic leaving, two big people for him at the club, and Allardyce maybe just not kind of maybe having the time for him, or not being that kind of guy who would, put his arm around his shoulder and say, "Come on, Grady, I need you to help me out. I need you to perform." Bear a lot of things in mind with Grady. He's a guy that lives by himself. He's a young man who lives in a city that is not his own, who has had to battle through the winter lockdown by himself. Really difficult. He's had injury problems. So all those things, you just think, okay, let's cut loose from the 2021 season and let's go again and let's have this fresh start. Valérien Ismaël's been asked about him already, and he said about how he would expect him to have a big season, how he fits perfectly into the plans that he's got for the club. So if Grady, and by all accounts it sounds like he's had a good pre-season in terms of his performances in friendlies as well, so by all accounts I think he'd be somebody that I would expect a big season from. Especially, I know he enjoyed a brilliant campaign in the Championship last time with Pereira, so I'd hope that he can almost come out of that shadow and be the main man for Albion.
Yeah, I think another player that Ismael said in the same breath as Diangana, who he thinks didn't have the best season, is my player of the season, is going to be Karlan Grant. I think he's obviously got a lot of stick last season. He had these massive expectations with a bit of a price tag, obviously played in instalments, but this price tag from Huddersfield, thought he was going to come in and do the business on a goal scoring front, and didn't quite do that for us last season. So I think cutting in off the left-hand side, I think he may be a bit of an asset for us. And even if we don't sign a striker, or even if we do sign a striker, I still think he's going to be in and amongst the goals this season. So I've gone for Karlan Grant. You've gone for Diangana. I think they're both very worthy choices, probably in our strongest area of the pitch, in the wide area. I'm now going to ask you, Joe, which youngster do you think is going to have a bit of a breakout season and come into the first team and do a decent job?
Well, Kevin Castro's got a really good chance, but somebody that I was really taken by in the under-23s games that I covered last season, and it seems that Sam Allardyce and Ismael has quite liked, judging by squad selections and pre-season, is Taylor Gardner-Hickman, somebody who I think he's done what he's needed to do in the 23s. I think now is a kind of opportunity for him to say, well, look, you're talking about getting cover for wing backs. I can be that guy. I can be the player who, if Connor Townsend's injured for 3 or 4 games, I can come into the team and play on that side. He's somebody that can play as a regular fullback, as somebody who can play as an out-and-out winger. He can play on either side of the pitch. I think there's a lot to like about Gardner-Hickman. So he'd be somebody I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more of. I hope he gets the opportunity to. And everything that Ismael said so far has suggested that he's open to giving academy players a chance. We saw what happened with Nathan Ferguson a couple of years ago, burst onto the scene, and nobody really had any plans for Ferguson to be in the starting 11 at that point. But look what he did in the space of 6 months. He got a Premier League move. So Taylor Gardner-Hickman, for me, I think there's not an obvious place in the squad right now, in the starting 11 right now, that he could just go in and fill. But I think if called upon, I think he's somebody who would be ready to grasp his chance with both hands.
Yeah, I think that's the same for most positions, I think, in the squad. I don't think there's an immediate place for a youngster to come in, but obviously as injuries come, as the season wears on and people start to tire, there is room, and obviously that wing-back position is somewhere that we're quite low on cover, and I think that it could be an opportunity to use those youth players and bring them in. I think my player would probably be Rayan Tulloch, because I was quite surprised. I looked at a chart the other day of how many minutes the team has played, like the different players have played in pre-season. I was quite surprised to see him, in the mid-tier of that with some decent minutes under his belt. I didn't actually realise that he'd got many minutes at all. So I'm thinking, I'm hoping that he can bounce back. I think he had a pretty bad injury at Doncaster that ruled him out of most of his loan spell, which obviously is a shame for him, and he didn't really get the chance to shine. But I think maybe this season, providing a bit of cover on the wings, I think he could be one to watch. So yeah, I've gone for Tulloch, and you've gone for Gardner-Hickman.
Taylor Gardner-Hickman. Yep.
Decent. So we'll go on to the big prediction, which is Joe. Where do you think Albion are going to finish this season?
God, it's a stab in the dark, isn't it? There's 1 or 2 guys that I follow on Twitter who have been doing League 1 and League 2 predictions this week, and it's fair to say they've been quite contested. So it would be very, very difficult. I'm only being asked to pick one team, never mind 24. So I think, I couldn't really say for sure, but I think Albion will be top 6. I don't think that's really, I know it's a different league, different season, different manager, but it's somewhere where we've always found ourselves. Certainly, in my lifetime, in the last 20 years, it's always somewhere where we've kind of really, since just after Gary Megson took over, we've always been there or thereabouts. So I'd say top 6. I think I'd probably take a playoff place now, just to be sure that we were in the top 6. If it meant, having to kind of gamble and take on the risk of more playoff heartache, which we've had our fair share of in the last 10, 15 years, then so be it. But as we've both talked about enough tonight, there are some good teams in that league, and I know it will be difficult week to week, and the championship season is a grueling one, but the cream tends to rise to the top, and you've seen that the last couple of seasons when Premier League teams have come down, they've gone straight back up again. So
yeah,
I do think we'll be up there. I'm not sure you're going to get me to commit on an exact position, but I will say top 6.
Okay, that's fair. I think that we will just miss out on an automatic place. I think we'll go for. I'm going to go for 3rd or 4th or something like that. I think we'll just miss out. The playoffs, of course, it would be foolish of either of us to even begin to predict that prediction. But we've got those in the bag. Hopefully, we won't come back to them in a season's time and think, "Goodness me, what were we thinking?" Yeah. If we've ended up finishing mid-table or something. But hopefully, we'll
or if we've won the league by 10 points and we're wondering why we ever doubted Valérien Ismaël in the first place. Then.
Yeah, I think we'll be pretty upset with ourselves if we do without having much confidence in the manager to get us up automatically. But Joe, a massive thank you for coming on to the show today. It's been a pleasure having you to talk about the season ahead, and hopefully it's going to be a good one for Albion.
My pleasure, mate. As always, enjoy it.
Yeah, and that brings me to the end of this episode of the Baggies Podcast. A massive thank you to Joe for joining me. And if you're new around here, be sure to give us a subscribe and be sure to listen in next week after the Bournemouth game, where we'll be giving a bit of a match reaction to that as well. But until then, guys, stay safe and have a great week, Baggies fans, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.